Session earlier today, we had 5 speakers working with a room full of health practitioners, trying to help the next generation of people that are your care providers to have the latest research and a better understanding of how these tools are used in a clinical fashion. And we had a great opportunity there to do this. All of that was recorded, so it'll be available to anybody here. You can find it on our website at CannSolve.com. There's a video link. Last year's 8 presenters are on there if you want to get a bit of a dive into the stuff we did last year and this year, so you won't miss a thing. So everything's been recorded for that. We do this evening session because we like to create an opportunity for folks that are in the general public to have access to people that work and research cannabis. Because I know a lot of people have questions, and sometimes it's just the best thing to do is put people in front of you who will do their best to provide you with the answers that you're seeking. So tonight's format is going to be just a little bit of a short presentation, but most of the time it's actually just going to be questions from people in the audience. We are going to have a microphone runner here. Not sure if it's going to be Charlie, or maybe we'll have another volunteer, but it's at least going to be Charlie. Hi, Charlie. So we're going to run the microphone around to people and make sure that you can be heard clearly by everybody and that sort of thing. So we'll pass that around in the Q&A. And really, tonight's topic, we do focus on pain, but I think it's equally important that if people have questions in general about cannabis, please feel free to bring your questions forward. We don't want to restrict the topic just to pain. I know people have a lot of questions, and so feel free. That's why we're here. Just briefly to begin, we'll pass the microphone down the line and give you a chance to get to know a little bit of who's sitting here in front of you. And from there, we're going to open up to your questions. And then we're going to open a small time slot for a presentation from some really wonderful people from Thompson Rivers University doing research that I think is just absolutely outstanding. It's the kind of research that I really wish we were able to do more of. And I'm so thrilled that they're here tonight to help us understand some of the insights they've learned in their work. So we'll do a little presentation on that. I think it's important to share that information with the public here. So thank you all for coming. I really appreciate this. I want to say thanks as well to our volunteers. They've been working really hard here today. The Mastermind Studios crew has been working so long. It's been long days to make all this happen and get able to go here. So thanks to the Mastermind folks as well. They've been really, really wonderful to us. The coffee tonight, local coffee shop, 5 Bean, just over in Sahali there. Nice folks. They donated all this coffee, and we end up with some really nice stuff here. So really grateful for that offer as well that we've received. So thanks to everybody. Thanks for being here, and we'll kind of get started now with the rest of the evening. Now, I'm Michael Cohen. I'm the owner of the CannSolve clinic. It's the only dedicated medical cannabis clinic in Kamloops. All of our work and all of our focus is on finding ways to use medical cannabis in ways to help people to improve their symptom management, their function, and their quality of life. We're a very high human touch, trying to reduce the barriers for people who are struggling to get relief from any conditions they're suffering from. We know people go through an awful lot, and we just do everything in our power to try to take the barriers away, to make the process of learning how cannabis could possibly assist you with your own needs. And we try to make that easy and accessible and understandable. And at the same time, we have a very comprehensive and dedicated team of physicians, nurses, educators, and administrators who just care an awful lot in trying to help you find your way through so you can get the assistance you need and hopefully a better quality of life. So we'll turn things over now down the line here, pass this off to Dr. Ian Mitchell.
Hi, thanks, Michael. I'm Ian Mitchell. I'm one of the emergency physicians in town here. That's kind of my main job. I'm also involved in training new family physicians within the Kamloops area. We have 8 residents a year that come as doctors and leave as family doctors. So we train them, and my responsibility is to teach them how to carry out research and how to understand journal articles and how to interpret research. On the cannabis side, I'm involved in a study looking at the effects of cannabis on PTSD symptoms, and that's happening at UBC Okanagan, now moved to Vancouver, as a project between UBC and Tilray.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Nan Stevens. I'm a faculty member in the School of Education and Social Work at Thompson Rivers University. My relationship to cannabis is this. I'm a mother first of a child who lives with autism, a seizure disorder, and an intellectual disability. I'm a scholar second. You'll hear from the research that one of our research assistants and another colleague that works with me at TRU does in the social sciences. So we're scholars in the lived experiences of how medical cannabis can be beneficial for loved ones with disabilities. My situation is as a mother of a child with autism and other diverse labels, if you will. However, we're here to share some research about findings we've done on 3 different studies, so we look forward to doing that. And then I'd certainly be interested in answering questions from the pediatric end or the medical cannabis end for disabilities in a broad spectrum.
Hi, my name's Lynette Lamore, and I've just recently completed the Bachelor of Social Work program at TRU, which is where I had the opportunity to do this research project. I also have a degree in psychology, an undergraduate degree. I've always been very interested in treatment options, specifically in mental health, and that's where my interest in CBD has come from.
Hello, I see a few of you I know. I'm Florianne Fair from the School of Nursing at TRU, and I have a pediatric nurse background as well, involved with a few of these folks here with a variety of angles, different angles with cannabis, and it's been quite a journey. I have to say, I started off not knowing a thing, and I'm constantly learning more. So definitely have a background with the pediatric side if you're interested, and mostly just how to navigate through the system and some of the barriers as well. So learning a lot, and we'll share a lot.
Hi, everyone. Whoa. That's how you do that.
Turn up the volume when I gave it to you.
That didn't work like that during the talk I just did. What's going on? Hello, my name is Robert Gora. I work with a licensed producer of cannabis in Canada called the Green Organic Dutchman. We produce certified organic cannabis, which is a little bit different than most. We produce organic cannabis at larger scale in 2 facilities in Eastern Canada, one in Quebec and one in Ontario. My background's really in pharmaceuticals. I was with Bristol Myers Squibb Pharmaceuticals for 11 years with Innomar Strategies, with patient support programs across Canada for 3 years servicing pharmaceuticals, and then I've been in medical cannabis for the last 3 years. So had the pleasure of working with many clinics across Canada, lots of physicians, research, et cetera, and I'm happy to see you all here. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks very much for that. So, Charlie, if you wouldn't mind grabbing the other microphone, please. Really what I figure is a lot of people are here tonight because they have their own questions about medical cannabis that's pertinent to themselves, and you'd like to have an opportunity to ask those questions. So I'm going to test that theory and see if I'm right by asking. Just to put things out to the audience, you now know who's here, and let's open it up for some questions. And if people are a bit shy, then I'm going to ask some questions. So don't worry about the awkward silence. Nan's got something to say, I'm sure, so I'm going to ask her some stuff. But we just want to open up to the floor. If anybody has a question, and if you don't mind just at least saying your first name, that would be great. And you can tell us a little bit about maybe what your interest is, or if you just want to jump right into your question, this is open. So feel free, we're here for you. So let's ask some questions. Who would like to start? Anybody? No, we're gonna want us to generate some banter for you. Yeah, no, but that's okay. No, it's totally cool. I appreciate that, Kelly. We'll come back to you a little bit later. So no sweat. I'm gonna start off just talking a little bit about cannabis and pain. I know that the big focus this year is on ways that we can help improve this. And just by a show of hands here, how many people right now have any personal experience with like using cannabis? Can I just get a show of hands? People are comfortable saying that? Yeah. So a lot of people here are actually familiar with cannabis in one way or another. How many people are using cannabis to actually treat some sort of health concern? Yeah, so we got a lot of shared experience there, and people in the audience. Anybody here fairly new to cannabis, like within this year, just started it, like as a brand new thing? Yeah, we have one person in the back. Everybody else is maybe, yeah. So kind of folks that are kind of a little bit more new to this, hey? And the rest of us have kind of been around the block for a little while. Maybe we've got some shared insights. And I really encourage you to recognize that your experiences are incredibly valuable and important. I always call it the human laboratory. So a lot of times we look to the lab reports, well, how strong is that cannabis and this and that. But I'll tell you, the human laboratory is the experience we care about most because it's your experience. the numbers can do one thing for one person, another for another, but what your experience is actually particularly important. So we've got a lot of people in the room here with experiences, and I hope you'll feel comfortable to share them a little bit. Now, in cannabis and pain, it's interesting to note that a lot of people, started off with THC. And I think, most of us here have some understanding or experience with THC, and we kind of, well, maybe some don't. We got some people shaking their heads. Oh, totally new. Oh, wow. We should give you a microphone because it's a good story. Where's Charlie? Yeah, Charlie, let's bring this up. And let's get your name because this is important. Let's talk about this. Yeah, what's your name?
My name is Helen.
Hi, Helen.
And I have no idea about anything of this.
Yeah.
I don't like cannabis because I don't like the smell of it. I have neighbors and it's nasty.
Yeah.
And so I've always been against it. So,
Good.
But I have some different areas of my body that is in pain.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I just had a cortisone injection two weeks ago and hasn't done anything for me in my arm. So I'm just kind of curious about all of this.
Yeah.
But I just don't want to be addicted now to starting to smoke up this stuff.
Good stuff.
So I'm very naive about the whole thing. So I have no idea.
That's great. Did you say your name was Helen?
Yes.
Helen, thank you for starting things off here. I'm going to put Dr. Mitchell on the spot and just pass the microphone over to him because he's just within reach and striking distance. He's not going to sit next to me anymore, but I'm just going to pass it over and we can...
Thanks for the question, honestly. It's, and really it's your group that's dominating the medical cannabis field right now because we're seeing people who've had a great life. They've lived life the fullest and now they're paying a bit of the price for that. The knees are going and the back's aching and that's just me, but and we get to the point where, okay, well, I'm not sure if you've been prescribed any other medications, but if you had cortisone, you may have prescribed gabapentin or anti-inflammatories or whatever, and all those things obviously have side effects. As a physician, I'm not really telling anybody to smoke anything. Most of my patients, the great majority, are taking cannabis oils, and you can get those in capsules so they don't smell as much, and so there's ways around that aspect of things. I gave a talk this afternoon about gabapentin and how it's basically a useless drug. The research was conducted by criminals, and newer research shows it doesn't work. But it's still massively prescribed by physicians, and that's okay, and there may be some patients who are helped by that. But realistically, it's a drug of abuse. We know this, gabapentin is. That has significant side effects with minimal helpfulness to people. But doctors don't really convey that to you. They say, well, you should try this and see if it works for you. And that's really what I'm here about. This is cannabis now, and we can talk about it now in a way that we can really focus on the thing that you don't want, which is impairment, because that's what everybody says. First thing they do when they walk in the office, I don't want to be high all the time. I'm like, nobody does. There's a store for that. You can go and get your stuff. You don't need to come see me. So you have legitimate concerns about what's going on, but the things we're talking about are really different than things you're talking about, because I'm not talking about you going and smoking up and eating Doritos in the basement.
Good.
You can do that. You don't need to come see me for that.
Or those desserts that they have now, those edible things, no.
But I gotta tell you, I have a ton of little old ladies in my practice who have a bit of a cookie every night for their arthritis, and they take that instead of their sleeping pill, and they sleep great, and they wake up in the morning and they feel fantastic. So, and they've gone from a miserable 4 hours of sleep a night to now a 6-hour solid sleep, and they wake up and they feel great. So there's hope and potential for this, and it's not for everybody. I got people for sure, this is not their thing. All power to you. I'm here to show you how to do it safely, how to do it, taking your medications into consideration and seeing if it works for you. If it doesn't, that's okay. You've tried lots of other stuff. This is just one other thing. But I've had lots of patients that it's really done wonders for, and that's why I guess I'm doing it. So I'd encourage you to come by and talk to us anytime. We'd be happy to see you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen. Yeah, appreciate that. So that's how we do it. We just need the next person to put up their hand and tell us a little bit about themselves or share a bit of their story.
I just wanted to follow up in regards to that,
Yeah.
saying that there's many ways of using cannabis that aren't inhaling. So there's topicals that are going to be coming out in a wide variety soon, probably not likely until the new year. Like a topical cannabis product. So a cannabis product you would put on the skin.
Yeah, it's a cream.
So, and then I'm actually one of the educators. I work with Dr. Mitchell. I'm the person you would see after your appointment. But in that sense, a lot of our patients, they're not ingesting THC at all. They're mainly putting it on topically. The nice thing is you don't get that euphoric kind of psychoactive effect using it on the skin. So it's quite nice in that effect. And you can put quite a bit of THC in direct contact with the skin quite safely. So a lot of our patients are even trying just the topical route even before trying the oral or in inhaled. So yeah, exactly. And there's lots of creams and yeah, exactly.
Yes, dip your toe.
And even when we do have patients come in and they're starting on an oil product, we always make sure we're starting them off at an extremely low dose to ensure that there aren't going to be any side effects introduced that we're not looking for. And we always make sure that dose is taken into consideration with other medications as well. So, and then we always like to go up in small doses. Our clinic motto is we like to start low and go slow. So that's our thing. So yeah.
You know, Helen, if in the dining room you've got that little knob on the wall that you push it in, it clicks and it makes the light turn on, and then you can turn the dial and the light gets brighter or dimmer. Yeah, so and you're familiar with that, right? And you probably know exactly how bright to make that room depending on whether it's a formal dinner, a little more like a Christmas Eve dinner. You might change how bright the light is in there, right? But the truth is, you know just when to stop on the dial, don't you? Then I would trust, following what Charlie's just told you about, that when you start off at the bottom of the dial where the bulbs hardly are lit at all and you're like, I didn't really notice anything. That's great. That's where we're going to start you. I didn't notice anything. We're so thrilled when you noticed nothing. I mean, when you think about it, what we really want to make sure is that you feel comfortable and in control. Does that sound like you? You want to be comfortable and in control. And we do too. So the best part is that we have the same agenda. You want to do what you need, and we don't want to create any experience that is unwanted. And that's what's really important to doing good pain management, is at least half of it is how you're feeling in your head. So if we frighten you or cause you to feel, worried, then I think our pain management strategy is going to be compromised. Whereas if you think, these guys are going to start me at such a low dose, that's going to be completely underwhelming. And I'm going to wonder, what is this cannabis stuff? Does it even work? It's okay. You start off, just like in the dining room, when you first turn it on, it's so dim, are the bulbs even on? But you know what? You know when to stop turning the dial. And with what Charlie explained in his process with this is that he'll make sure you know how to do that. And the secret is when there's a comfortable place to start, where you're respected through the entire process, and your goals, what you want, is our focus. We don't have some other agenda about cannabis and your health, except to make sure that we always look at those three things. Are we helping you improve your symptom management, your function, and your quality of life? And if we get 3 yeses from you, we're probably a pretty good team together. All right? And that's the secret to working with cannabis in a way that makes sense, is you got to follow it like Charlie was talking about, where you have to have a good plan that you feel comfortable with, and what Dr. Mitchell was saying, where you have to have all the right clearance and review and that safety and that ability to feel the confidence that your decision was well considered and it was evidence-based, and it was done by the people that have the requisite skills and knowledge to assist you with that. And if you follow all of those check marks, chances are then you'll feel more comfortable going into this process. So I'm really grateful for your question, and I hope that shed a little bit of light on the difference between what we sort of call the more just the recreational, or I call it sort of more the unintentional use network market, because at that point you're just kind of grabbing some cannabis and whatever it is, it's perfectly fine. But I think for you, Helen, you'd want to be a lot more specific. You'd want a certain outcome, and you'd want some assistance in being driven to that. That's the intentional model. So when you think about it, I want to be an intentional cannabis user. That's it. Because then you know what you're using it for, how much you're using, and it's all in your control. And you feel like this could work for me personally. It's interesting in cannabis-based medicine that we're actually developing a relationship. And if you think about this sort of analogy, it can help people to sort of see what we're doing. Every relationship you enter into has a certain duration to it. And if you have a chronic condition, you may be going into a long-term from now on relationship. That's no different than if a physician puts you on gabapentin. When do they plan to take you off gabapentin? I don't think there's a guideline for that. I think there's just more, but we heard that earlier today. But the truth is, it's a relationship now. But is it a healthy relationship or an abusive one? And I think in terms of the presentation earlier today, we could see there are many reasons to see that a relationship with gabapentin could be characterized as a more abusive relationship than the cannabis relationship. Because the side effects, for example, that are present or potentially present with gabapentin we learned today, and there are a number of them, and some of them are potentially very concerning. And if you were going to enter into a relationship with a person like that, I don't think we'd be too happy about wanting to, let alone saying, and you're going to be stuck with them from now on. So what I care about most in cannabis is to view it as a relationship. And if it is, and it's doing those 3 S's, where the relationship is improving your symptom management, it's enhancing your day-to-day function to do the things you want to do, and ultimately your quality of life is better because we're together. Doesn't that sound like a great marriage? So I encourage you to check out how the relationship feels like to you when you're getting started in cannabis. If it feels like it starts off low and slow, well, that's okay for relationships, right? They start off kind of low and slow. You just take your time, get to know the whole situation. You don't need to rush into it or feel pressured that you've got to be taking this or taking that. Take your time. That's the part to take. So a great question, and I'm really glad we were able to open up the concept about people that are brand new to cannabis. It's very important to think it through so that some of those thoughts in our head that have come from past history or other people, that we have an opportunity to challenge those thoughts a little bit with evidence and what's true about that. Thank you. Wonderful. Okay, if we got someone else, here we go. Perfect.
Hi, my name's Dan.
Hello, Dan.
Hey, and the question, things I see right now is a big resurgence from the baby boomers coming to do this. I noticed that. And basically, for the last 3 months, I'd like to thank you, Mike, and Charlie, and CannSolve for giving your lectures. It's really good.
Thank you.
The first question I have is people with mental illnesses. We have to watch out for CBDs because they contain a bit of THC, which might drive them into a mania or something. What could we find for those people?
So the point's well taken that there's certainly some people that THC is not good for, and someone with active schizophrenia, for some of them, for sure, the THC can make their symptoms worse. There's a British psychopharmacologist called David Nutt who's very well known, and he was giving a talk in Toronto on this issue. And he said in his experience, though, he'd had some people, some schizophrenics, who said, you know, the voices are louder, but they're way over there. So in different people, they may find benefit still from THC. Speaking of CBD and mental illness, particularly schizophrenia, CBD is an antipsychotic. So it can be used to treat the symptoms of schizophrenia. Now, the whole point of that was, for sure, you'd want to be getting lots of CBD and very little THC in that, okay? But the CBD alone can be used as a treatment for schizophrenia, as a counter. Sorry, great question. So you guys are beginners and some people don't, not a problem. Have you heard about the cannabis that fixes kids' seizures? So you heard of that. That's CBD. So CBD's part of cannabis. It's different from the THC molecule. That's the stuff they give to kids with seizures. So these kids are born, they got 100 seizures a day, you give them CBD and it stops. Okay? Doesn't get them high. But it's important to note that it's almost impossible to get a plant that is, or to get even a solution that is pure CBD. Usually there's a little THC in there as well. So a lot of the products that are sold might be 20 to 1, 25 to 1. It still means there's some THC in there. So you got to watch that. And you know, I got my some of my little old ladies, and you know, even like that little tiny bit of THC, like, oh, it's not, and that's weird. But some people just can't tolerate even that much. So 100%, there's people that shouldn't take it. one of the hopes of legalization was that we would take away some of the product where it's very high levels of THC, very low CBD, because we think that that's the kind of product that can make mental illness worse. But if people have a choice, maybe they want stuff that isn't quite as potent. Maybe they want stuff that's also balanced with CBD if they knew what they were getting and wanted to make the choice. And then they get a product that's safer, as opposed to buying an unknown product on the street where you really don't know what's in it, and it probably is just very high THC. So hopefully with legalization, we offer people a choice and they can choose to not have only the THC products, which is really what's out there right now. So the CBD right now, it is approved for use by the FDA in children for seizures, and CBD preparations alone, we also give to people for anxiety, for arthritis type of thing, and that's, we say, generally non-intoxicating, the CBD alone. But as I was saying, there can sometimes be tiny fractions there. So we're always careful, as we are with anything there, just to make sure that people don't get in any trouble with that.
Excellent. Really helpful to add the question there, Dan, with your perspective adding mental health and then coming back to some of the basics around, some people haven't heard of really what CBD is and what that can be used for. And I'm really glad you keep bringing up that beginning learning mindset. That's super important for all of us to keep doing that. So thank you for that as well to both of you. Excellent.
On your own,
Yes.
decide to try something like this, is it kind of go off the wall, or
Well, I hope not. So my main job is I work in the emergency department. So I do occasionally see people who have taken too much. And really that's the whole goal of our clinic, is to never have, if that ever happens with my patients, we have seriously failed them. Because that's exactly why we're there. We're there to educate people, tell them. So you can 100% take too much, as you can of anything. The good news is, no matter how much you take, you're not gonna die. Might think you're gonna die. Might be worried you're gonna die. But you're not gonna be too happy and you'll be too dizzy, and you're gonna come in and see me in the emergency department and say, okay, well, it's just chill out for a bit and we'll send you home in the morning and it's no big deal, and you'll laugh about it later. So there's a couple of things around that. First is, you say you're taking it home, and great, take it home. Don't leave it for other people to find, because that's what we're having problems with, is people, they'll get the cookie and they'll leave in their fridge and then someone else comes along and eats it. And it's usually their granny or something, so it's terrible that way. Nobody wants to have that happen. So you gotta label your stuff. But also what we're bringing to now is, before you had all these edibles and the dispensaries and whatever, and God only knows what's in that. And they've taken samples from different dispensaries and found different amounts in them. What we're coming to now with legalization is knowing exactly what's in the product. And that's the way that people don't end up in emergency, because they know what's in a product. And it's like if you went to a bar and they said, well, every drink you have might have 1 to 6 measures of alcohol. Well, that bar is going to be in trouble. I'm going to be seeing a lot of people from that bar because it's not going to be good. But that doesn't happen. You know how much alcohol is in a drink that you drink. And if that's the same with cannabis, then people aren't going to get into as much trouble as if they don't know what's in it. And that just kind of makes sense. That's good.
Excellent. Yes, question right back there. Excellent.
Hi, my name's Dana.
Hi, Dana.
And Helen, I've been taking CBD products for a long time, and I never get high, and I get lots of benefits. So it's possible to use medical cannabis and not have psychoactive effects at all, and to get lots of benefit from it. I use it for PTSD and for anxiety. Ian Mitchell, I understand that's something that you're studying. I'd be interested in finding out what the results, what you're finding with PTSD. I was a paramedic for a lot of years.
For sure, and we were certainly looking for paramedics, first responders in our research, because it's a category with huge amounts of PTSD. Our study is looking at straight THC versus THC with CBD versus placebo. So we have placebo cannabis, got nothing in it, so that's kind of a raw deal for the people who get that. But that's how research works. The study is in progress, so we don't have the results yet. It may be a while. There are similar studies that have wrapped up or soon to wrap up in the States, and I'm waiting publication of those, very similar to what we're doing. So we will hopefully have more information about that. I think So again, as a point for Helen and maybe other people, is that one of the things we believe, and I think is relatively well supported in the literature, is that CBD helps take down the effect of THC as well. So the products that are pure THC can make people anxious, paranoid kind of thing. But when you pair that with the CBD, then that really takes down that effect, which is what you're looking for. Okay? So you can use products that are just pure CBD and have zero THC in them, and that's great, or as little as we can have. Or, for people with really significant pain, neuropathic pain, they're going to want the THC because that's the stronger of the pain management. But we give that to them with the CBD to help take down that psychoaffective, plus give them the benefits of the CBD as far as anti-inflammatory benefits, because that's one of its other actions. So with that kind of product, we minimize impairment, we maximize the benefit, and that's really what anybody's looking for.
Excellent. Yeah, CBD seems to be the one topic that has a lot easier discussion because there isn't necessarily as much stigma because you don't automatically assume CBD is cannabis. And it's kind of interesting, and I'll pass it down to Robert here to talk a little bit about that, but I know he was mentioning there is some stuff on the horizon about CBD, not that we have all the answers, but I still just want to kind of put him on the spot a little bit about CBD. And from the licensed producer standpoint, we were talking a little bit about these, minimal THC levels and sort of predominantly CBD formulations, and maybe we can just pass it down to Robert and talk about that.
Thanks. No, so just to back up a little bit, because I think there's a varying amount of knowledge in the room about cannabis in general and cannabinoids, which are THC, CBD, and others. Thank you. So I think the science of cannabis in general has evolved a ton over the last 50 years. We know it's been used as a medicine for hundreds of years, but when people talk about cannabis, they immediately picture Woodstock or people getting high or whatever. So that's the stigma that we all live with and regularly challenge. In the last, especially in the last 5 years and 10 years, 5 to 10 years, there's been a ton more research in the space, and the science of cannabis and how cannabis works in the body has evolved a ton. So we talked about THC. There's a really long word that THC stands for. I won't get into that, but CBD is a lot easier to say, cannabidiol, aside from, tetrahydrocannabinol. It's a little longer. But all that aside, those are only 2 cannabinoids that are in the plant, and there's over 100, and then there's over 200 terpenes that make them smell, and there's medicinal benefits to those, and terpenes and cannabinoids working together. So as I talk about this, it gets very complex, and then people just go, I don't get it, I'm not going to bother, right? And that's the key to having great physicians and clinics that understand and can explain this to you. The reason THC is so prominent in our minds is because all the plants over the years had been bred to be the highest possible THC in order to have the psychoactive effect. And THC binds to a receptor in the body that is heavily located in the brain and central nervous system, which is why you have this high. CBD, luckily, we have some plant genetic that's higher in CBD and very low in THC. And so these are the 2 major cannabinoids that we have in very high quantity. But over the last few years, people that breed plants have been breeding them to have higher of other cannabinoids. And I think over time, we'll be able to, take those and say, what does that do, and study it and understand it more in the body. So when we think about this, all pharmaceutical drugs, while many pharma products are derived from plants as it is, but they all work in the body on receptors. So if you think of blood pressure medication, we have calcium channel blockers, we have beta blockers, we have ACE inhibitors, we have angiotensin II receptor blockers, and they're all doing things with receptor sites in the body on different systems. And the endocannabinoid system is just something that we didn't know a lot about, and most doctors don't either. So this is new. It's new for many people, and we know there's CB1 and CB2 receptors. We know how CBD and THC work with the body. And tonight's not a full-blown education on that. But the good news is, as I said, we do have certain plants, genetics with high CBD and low THC, as Michael said. So the good part about that is CBD acts a little bit differently. There's no psychoactive effect with CBD. However, if you derive CBD from a plant, it may have a little bit of THC in it. It's not very likely that you'll get high from it, but we've heard reports that even with a 25 to 1, 25 parts CBD, 1 part THC, somebody might feel it a little bit, right? But it's nothing like taking a high volume THC product. So a lot of licensed producers out there do have a higher potency CBD product, and as research continues to drive, we're seeing even higher potency CBD products come on the market. The other thing I'll mention is a lot of companies are looking into hemp products. CBD from hemp has no THC, essentially. Although they don't know, the studies haven't been done to tell you if CBD from hemp is as effective. There's some studies coming out of Israel to show that, I've seen some data that and others may know more about it, but there's some data that shows that CBD from hemp may not be as effective as a whole plant extract with all the different compounds in it. So, but it's exciting times because we are seeing product development, but it's very early. But the good news is for anybody interested in cannabis therapy, there's a lot of options now, and the physicians that are involved with authorizing cannabis know a lot about it.
I'll add a couple of things just for folks that are kind of interested in some ways of kind of thinking about how to choose cannabis. And, there's many different ways to go about doing this, but we mentioned terpenes just a moment there. Robert was talking about this, and it's important. Terpenes now are in essence being studied because they're not a small part of the equation. They seem to be increasingly valuable in understanding why we see the specific effects, and there's some predictive quality to this. We're not at the science yet where we can say, hey, for you particularly, this is what's going to work well, and you should look for cannabis that smells like lemons. Okay, interesting, but let's go with this for just a moment. Just to keep things a bit more kind of in a box. There's like over 42,000 terpenes, okay? And they're in foods. If everyone's ever had lemon zest, have you ever gone and grated a lemon or an orange, anything with a rind like that, and you sort of smell it right away, and you're like, wow, is that ever potent? Well, in the lemon, you're smelling limonene, and limonene is in cannabis as well. And it turns out that limonene-dominant cannabis seems to have this particular quality for some people. Some might call it more of an uplifting, more of an energetic experience, more of something that is motivating or promotes someone to get active. So now it's not to say that any cannabis, like all cannabis that has a sort of citrusy or limony sort of dominant smell is going to do that, because it's not the entire equation. But if you're an explorer and you're starting out in cannabis and you're interested in one way you could look at it, you can take cannabis and put it in 4 boxes. Okay, now obviously I'm minimizing this. It's more complex than this. But to get things down to a level that's functional, it's this. When you open up the bottle of cannabis and you smell it, do you smell fuel, like a gas smell? Fruit, like a lemon or lime, orange? Yes. Skunk? Very good. Floral, so you can has sort of a flowery kind of smell to it. And the last one, which is earth, does it kind of smell like a dirt floor? And the idea is that each one of these areas tend to have their own kind of experience. Now, I'm by no means going to tell you again that this will do that, but more of in the fuel side, the cannabis, when it's inhaled, and potentially if it's in an oil, the effects seem to come on more rapidly and of a more dominant, potent kind of, yeah, that's the effect I was looking for. Something that's a little bit more of an aggressive onboarding. Now, if you go down to California and you look to what sells in the recreational marketplace, if it doesn't smell like fuel, they're not interested, because they're looking for high THC and that sort of gasoline, kerosene, jet fuel smell that they get when they do this. Why? Because whatever is in that mix, wow, does it ever have that enhanced effect? So for people that are interested in that, okay, if I smell fuel, maybe I should expect that this might be a little bit more of an aggressive kind of onset. Now, that might not always be the case, but it's an interesting way to explore it, because that's only half the equation, maybe. Next, you kind of look at the fruit side. As I said, maybe energetic, uplifting, sort of an interesting thing if you want to kind of clean the house and you're in pain, but you need to get moving and doing something, but you can't be encouraged to go and sort of sleep after that. Well, maybe those fruit fruit-dominant ones, when you smell the terpene, smells fruity, might provide the uplifting side of the equation. You move on to the florals. If you want to spend some time lost in some thought, you just want to kind of stare off for a little while and be like, you know what I'm going to do in my garden next year? I'm going to grow some roses. I like roses. If you want to spend some time just kind of comfortably relaxing within your own mind, cerebral kinds of effects, maybe productivity isn't the number one thing, but maybe creativity is, and you're interested in thinking up new ideas for some project or a book or something, maybe you want to look to the florals and you want to sort of say, well, that's kind of flowery. Let's see if this puts me in more of a cerebral kind of experience. Fine. And we look at the earth-dominant terpenes, like the dirt floor. You know, you inhale that and it's like, whew, that's dusty. But the thing is, a lot of those tend to be more grounding, more of a relaxing kind of experience. Now, remember, this is just one way to explore cannabis. By no means is this meant to be, some sort of definitive guide to cannabis. Let's be clear. But to help people sort of minimize it for a second down to some basic categories, because you can tell right away if you open up a cannabis bottle and you smell it, do you like it? Because if you like it, there's something about the smell of that cannabis that is appealing to you. And as an explorer, why not start with that? What smells do you like, and go and try to find types of cannabis that have that. Now, at least another important part of the equation, though, is how much THC, how much CBD. Now, if it smells like fruit and it's very high in THC, yeah, it might be uplifting and energizing, but is that a right fit for you? Now, maybe you take a moderate to lower strength, that's fruit, and you go, you know what? It's just enough for me to feel motivated, energetic, active, and comfortable. So it's at least two parts. Look for the smell and look for how much THC or CBD. If you're unfamiliar with this, go to the smell and go to predominantly almost all CBD. Why? Because if you inhale that, it might be uplifting, but it's not really going to push the gas all that hard. You're not really going to be overdriven by that effect. In fact, you might find you're a bit calm, but uplifted, energetic. Why not try first with the smell and then working with predominantly CBD? Once you're comfortable with that experience, you could certainly move to increasing to have some THC and some CBD and find how that experience works. If you're fairly experienced in this, pick your smell and go for perhaps a little bit higher percentage, but know that as we age, it might be that our brains change and that perhaps we're more comfortable with moderate to lower levels of THC particularly, and not to really go after the high, heavy-hitting stuff. That might not be appropriate for medical use, and it might not even be comfortable for recreational use or intentional use for people that are perhaps a little bit older. There's some indication that maybe our brains just don't need the same type of heavy-hitting kind of stuff that maybe younger folks might use, and I would listen to your body. But just like Charlie said, you want to start with a low and kind of work your way up there. If it's an inhaled cannabis, we usually look at its percentages between 0 and 25%. And I would say that when we're looking low, we're in that kind of up to 5-ish% THC. If we're at our moderate, maybe around 15 is the tops, and then the high is 15+%. On the CBD side, the lowest CBD I've seen in any product in the store is maybe around 3 or 4%. The moderate maybe around an 8 to 10%, and a high CBD content in the flower might be more in the range of 13 to 15%. And so that gives you a sense of just what does low, medium, and high kind of look like, and then pick your smell. So it's kind of an interesting way to explore that, and I encourage people to just see if that might be something of a way to explore it and simplify things down a little bit. All right, let's take another question from the audience there. So let's do this. Yes, please, Charlie, right over here. Yeah, and what's your name?
Hi, my name is Carmen.
Hi, Carmen.
And I can relate to you, Helen, in that years ago, I didn't like the smell of cannabis either. but now that's changed. I find it a beautiful, comforting smell, and that's. And I don't even prefer to inhale it. I prefer to ingest it, to use edibles. I came to it because I had, well, I'd say I still have a sleep disorder. That was my primary reason to try it, and I came at it with my knees knocking because I had all of these stigmas in my mind. But now it's like a lifeline because I can sleep. I have children, and I always struggled with sleep, but of course after having children, that just went whoop, sleep just disappeared, and my quality of life was way down. And so I was very happy to find something that worked. And this is very exciting to have people here who are studying, and then there's research getting on board, because I've had to just figure it out myself. And that part was a little scary as well. And even now, I'm kind of in a, maybe some of you can speak to this, but I'm in kind of the last 2 months in a zone where things aren't working the way they have. And so I need help again because things just aren't working. So I'm hoping someone can speak to insomnia.
So insomnia is a tough one. There's college guidelines, that's the college that regulates physicians, and they've kind of very specifically said you should not prescribe cannabis for insomnia because there's not enough research. But there's lots of other medications that they're giving people, and the Zopiclone and all these kind of, and the Valium and lorazepam kind of thing. And the worst of all right now is, and I'm sorry if anybody's on, quetiapine. And there's been an explosion in quetiapine use, which is an atypical antipsychotic, and it's never been approved for sleep. It's got horrendous side effects: restless leg syndrome, sudden death, prolonged QT syndrome. It's a drug of abuse, and it's just been pushed by drug companies in a big way. At the same time that the college is clamping down on Zopiclone, lorazepam, all these other drugs, so it's all been flowing to Seroquel. But nobody will talk to you about cannabis because they're not supposed to about this. Now, I can't say, and because the studies really haven't been done yet, about what the effects are on sleep just in general. We're still so far from understanding that. What I can tell you is from my clinical practice, people with painful sleep do amazing on cannabis. They really, like, if they just get a little bit of THC, boy, they sleep like they've never slept before, and that's just been a game changer for them. We don't really encourage people to smoke before bed. I really want them to go with oils because it lasts way longer, and that's the whole point, you know, and you want to kind of take it like an hour before bed so you kind of get some good time to make sure it's getting in your system and you can wind down. But people wake up and they feel great and they've had a better sleep. You know, as far as your specifics go, I'd love to come to our clinic sometime. We'll talk and we'll see if we can work something out for you.
Yeah, I think sleep is, we'll bring the mic over there next. I think sleep is one of those issues that's so important because in the absence of good sleep, there's so many other health concerns that take root. And I think with any of us, when we don't sleep well, how's our mental health? I mean, how are we doing with our own anxiety, our own depression, our own coping? How are all those things doing without a good night's sleep? But if that's chronic, that we're always having a disturbed or incomplete sleep, then what does that now lead to the greater potential of? And, you know, there's a lot of research to show that sleep disorders are connected to a lot of other problems. And so potentially, if we can find some way to improve sleep, could there be a protective effect, in essence, in minimizing the risks of other types of conditions that may be in ways related to this? And if we have good sleep and we can correct it early enough, would we be better off if we didn't have these long-standing chronic, you know, problems? And then let's just speak to the human impact of that. If you have a family and you wake up and you're trying to give your best, you know, as a husband or wife and a mom or a dad or a neighbor, and you're going through eyes that are half closed, and you want to be a better version of yourself there. You'd like to be energetic and positive and supportive and encouraging and, you know, all those things that make you, you. And if you're exhausted and you can't get that done, you're not really living up to the person you might want to be. And what happens day after day, week after week, month after month, living like that person, and the impact it has on your loved ones and your ability to work, your ability to have hobbies and all these other things that are important. But aren't we talking about just sleep? But look what it impacts. I mean, it's everything. So I wish that we had a much clearer direction from the college that said, if we are going to prescribe or authorize cannabis for sleep, that we do so in a conservative and responsible fashion, which I don't think is an unreasonable way to approach any medication. And so we're not going to be jumping into, high dose THC, on 4 times a day. I mean, what Dr. Mitchell's talking about is people having, just a very minor dose of this on a schedule, on a plan, something you do with intention. And when you do it and you record your observations, you're able to very gently turn the dose until you get your oil just to the right amount, and then you have the ability to be able to have that restful sleep and at the same time minimize any side effects or risks that you're experiencing. But if you don't sleep, how do you function well, right? So there's a lot of hidden impact there and a lot of suffering that people don't talk about when it comes to a person sleep deprived, because we think, oh, it's just a bad night's sleep, right? When actually you're less than the complete person you want to be. So I really respect that we bring up sleep disorders and what happens with them, because I think there's a lot of suffering that happens quietly in families, and we don't feel like it's kind of okay to say that. What's your challenges? My challenges are that I don't sleep well. That's tough for you. No, it is. It really is. And the impact it has is very widespread and widely felt. So thank you very much for bringing up that topic. I think we had a person waiting in the back there, so please, what's your name?
I'm Andrea.
Hi, Andrea.
We've met before, and
Has everybody in the room met you, Andrea?
No.
All right, they're about to. Everybody, this is Andrea.
Hi.
Hi, Andrea.
I just want to say thank you for having this event tonight, and I'm really happy to see everyone here. So my question, I'm hearing that there are you're having to do it on your own. I know from family experience, they live in a rural area, and that stigma is still very strong and ingrained, and also that they're on these other drugs that they're possibly afraid of getting off of to try a different route. So afraid of losing some of the perceived steps that they've made, when in reality, they're still suffering from pain. And so I'm confronted a bit with not having the expertise, but also not really being able to share and where they could go or where they get more information, given they're from a rural area in BC. And I'm hearing around the research component. So there's not a lot of research, or research is being done in Israel. So I want to know, what are some of those barriers to getting that research done, so that we have a better understanding of how it's going to help us with insomnia from the TRU folks as well, and what sort of strategies we can take, because I know us being here tonight is one step, and talking about it is really important, but how do we make those steps forward so that it's available and not having to figure it out ourselves.
Thank you, Andrea. That's really good. I'm going to pass this over to Nan, because I know that she's very passionate about the journey and access. That's very, very important. I'll just pass it over to Nan. She can share some insights.
Michael, actually, I'm going to pass it over to Florian in a minute, who's a nurse educator. Yeah. Research in general is really tricky, because we need resources to have research assistants and the social capital carry out a large project. Our funding is coming from small internal grants at TRU so far. We're working on more external funding. The stigma is attached. Every time we put a proposal forward for any research, we're always wondering, is it even going to be looked at? Because it's medical cannabis in the title. And we live it every day at TRU that, oh, you're the faculty who do that. And it's so relevant, it's so needed, it's so life-changing. However, we can't change people's minds about cannabis unless they have their own personal experience. So we're making a drop in the bucket, and you'll hear about our research hopefully tonight. And it's just small drops in the bucket to start. We need evidence-based research, absolutely. However, I'm a proponent of the lived experience. So you feel like a vulnerable person, Helen, starting off with this foreign thing to your body. Well, think about a 12-year-old boy who lives with autism who's nonverbal, and I'm thinking about giving him CBD or THC, whatever the product is. He's a nonverbal child, so I can't even get feedback. So my child is a different child now, and I jumped in because I needed his symptoms better. So I go with the testimonials, the lived experiences. I talked to a ton of other mothers. I convinced Dr. Mitchell to take my family on, and I had to really convince you at that time, but now he's on board with lots of pediatrics. However, if you need change, you have to jump on board to trying something different. So my piece of this is the research is coming slowly, and if we need something to make us sleep better or to make my child less violent because he was kicked out of school, I actually don't care about the research in that moment. I care about what all the other mums did across the country who had a violent child. And that seems to be the resource base for a number of people, is the lived experience of others. And it's social media, and it's testimonials and stories and narratives and all those kinds of experiences that say, I'm ready to try this because the pharmaceuticals aren't working. And so I want to say yes to research and yes to the storytelling. And the systemic approach is really...
Hearing people's stories is one way that we can win over a better system. And that's the piece. So we're kind of doing grassroots stuff. We've got three little studies we're going to share with you tonight that we're working on, different angles of it. But I think there is a theme of people having certain experiences, fumbling through stuff, becoming the experts themselves almost by accident, by trial and error, and facing some of the big barriers, especially with the rural area, having our GPs on board, having nurses on board, having the healthcare system having some understanding. So as educators, we're going back to our own curriculum and looking at where can we kind of cannabinoid, I don't know what the word would be, but we're trying to get more cannabis in the curriculum so that when nurses graduate, when physicians graduate, they have some information. One of the small studies, maybe I'm jumping into it too soon, Michael. All right, well, we'll just segue into it. We have just a tiny little study so we could get a sense of things. That's where we're starting. We're starting with tiny stuff so that we can build on it. And so one of my students got a tiny little grant, and I supervised her, and we put out a survey at IHA to the ER nurses, just for fun, because we know that, there's, a year ago things got legalized, and how are the changes? Are there any changes? What's going on? What are you seeing differently? What are you not seeing differently? And also, what do you know about cannabis? How much education do you actually have? Where are you getting the information from? And we got, we were hoping to get a lot of survey answers back. We got 25 back after putting the survey out, which was fine, but it sure gave us a wonderful amount of information. There were spots just to answer yes and no, and we had some other little numbers in there, but we also had spots for comments, which were really rich. And the bottom line is, should I put the slide up? I guess it doesn't matter. I can speak to it, but it's
right there.
It's up in there somewhere. It's just one little slide. But
the one PowerPoint version 6. Do you want us to go into the? Yeah, would you?
Yeah, put it on. What was fascinating was only one of the 25 nurses had any kind of information about cannabis or felt that they had some kind of education about it. So that tells us right there, okay, that's cool. We got something, because these are first line, front runners. We're about 4 slides in, or maybe, am I the first one? Oh, yay. Okay.
There's a clicker, by the way. You'll need
Just click it once. Yeah.
So, green button, red button's back, green button's forward.
Alrighty. Sure, put one forward. It's just a bunch of words, really. And Caitlin, by the way, she's a 4th-year nursing student. I had her, she's up there. She's amazing. Her mom's an ER nurse, too, from somewhere else. But anyway, so she's all about ER. Anyway, so I'll jump down to the knowledge part, and then I'll talk about what's going on, what they're seeing in the ER. But a few of them did some coursework. A lot of them are not getting any kind of education at their place of employment at this point, even though things have been ramping up and changing a little bit. So there's some issues there. Lots of suggestions, added comments that we didn't even ask about, saying we need this, we need that. We need to know what CBD is. We need to know what THC is. Like this is very, very fundamental stuff. And yes, it's changing all the time, as you're saying, right? We're coming across terpenes and all kinds of different things. But even just some basic education about what's happening, because people are coming forward and slowly sharing that they're on medicinal cannabis, or they're self-medicating. They're unintentionally finding things and intentionally finding things. Some are going to places like CannSolve or wherever they're going, and other patients are saying that they're just finding it somewhere else through family and through friends, through word of mouth, through the neighborhood. They're going on blog sites. They're growing their own plants and fumbling through that. Some of them have, professional helpers, and others are growing a bunch of plants in their house and making tea and baking and getting recipes off the blog site. So this is what they're telling the nurses in the ER. And the nurses are like, oh, that's why you've come in with psychosis or hyperemesis or vomiting or having all kinds of fun things. Some of the interesting folks that were coming in that the nurses said over the last year that was different from before legalization happened was the experimentation and the unintentional stuff. And the nurses didn't really know what to do with that because they don't have information sheets to hand out to educate people. So one of the papers we're working on right now is about the potluck phenomenon. No pun intended, but kinda, right? And it's important because, yes, I can get a recipe on how to make some brownies, serve it at a friend's place or over Christmas or whatever, and there is a potential for people not feeling anything at first. And so they're going to eat more. And then they'll have that third piece, and guess what happens at 2 hours later? They end up in the ER with nurses that don't really know what to look for or what to talk about with them, right? I mean, I'm just saying. So this is what they want. They want education. So part of the angle for the barrier is we got to start putting it back in the curriculum, right? And get that in there. Get them to understand more. We got to get out the public health nurses to get some education out there. We've got edibles being legalized now, but guess what? Edibles are happening anyway. People are going on the websites, and you're nodding. You got some good recipes probably, making your own stuff. My neighbor next door, she makes tea, and people come over and visit her, seniors, and they have a great time. And I've seen a few drive. I don't know what's going on. Okay. Anyway, I don't know, but stigma's there too, right? So they're all secretive about it. It's like their secret little book club, they call it. But the piece is this part, which is preventable. The accidental ingestion thing it's there, of course. It's real. It comes down to being educated, being careful with the packaging, being careful with where you're putting things. I mean, that makes sense. And teenagers, of course, too, they're daring each other to have these gummy bears, and they're doing fun things like teenagers do. And again, not feeling the effects right away, so they eat a few extras, and then it hits them, right? So the edibles thing is a new thing that we're gonna have to work through in Canada, and yeah, and we're experimenting, right? And that is happening. What's the other piece that we discovered here? Just really people trying it out, but not going through the proper mechanisms. And that's why going slow, going the way Michael is talking about it is so important. You really shouldn't be fooling around and trying it out on your own. You need to go through and get the proper education and the proper management of how to do it. It still has some side effects sometimes, right? For some people. And unfortunately, the ER nurses have seen a few changes in that piece in the last year. Not big changes. That was the interesting part, though, too. We did get some comments saying it wasn't as, we're surprised we didn't get more. I think because they were waiting for a whole bunch of stuff. A big siege, yeah. A big, tsunami of MVA increases and everything else. So that part hasn't really changed too much. But yeah, the edibles piece is an interesting element. That's new. So yeah, we've got some work to do. We got some work to do to educate others out there. We've got to do some stuff internally in the healthcare field, and that is one big barrier. It happened fast, this legislation. The stuff was on hold for a long time, so a lot of research didn't happen with the medical side. So we're doing everything we can now. We're also putting our feelers out of what people need to know about, so we can research that too and really get some studies out. So if there are certain topics that you think we need to cover, I think that's really important too. We need to know, what are your experiences? What are some things that you're stuck on? And what are some big barriers? And Nan and I have done a lovely study as well. It's coming along. We'll let you do your thing, okay? And we're finding some barriers that are very interesting as well. So.
We have money for undergraduate research at TRU, and Lynette just finished her social work degree.
This is really interesting to me, actually, because a lot of the things that I came up with are stuff that everybody's already touched on, especially you, Helen. Thank you. And actually, okay, and I'm going to say, because Dr. Mitchell had brought up Q-typing circle, that is the drug that made me want to look for other options, not just myself. With the degree I had previously, I worked with a lot of clients with living with mental health issues. And I've seen that stuff prescribed for anxiety and side effects, and wow. Anyway, I chose to look at a population between 18 to 25, kind of thinking, unlike me, you know, they've kind of grown up where maybe there is less stigma around cannabis in general. It's legalized, some issues like that. Is it something that people are considering? So my only really two criteria were that you were between 18 and 25, and that you considered yourself living with anxiety. And also just because I have a medical professional, well, a couple of you here, I'm using anxiety as a bit of an umbrella term. Yes, exactly, there's different diagnosis, there's PTSD, so I'm using that a little bit generically in this way. And the reason I'm interested in anxiety is because it's so prevalent. So what I was able to do was put a survey out. It's a link that went out on social media. True Wellness was partnering with me, and CannSolve Clinic was helping me get that information out there as well. So 13 questions that were like, you're answering from, you know, strongly agree to strongly disagree. I had 4 open-ended questions where I was hoping to get a little deeper into some information, and in the end I had about 135 participants. Sorry, I did include this piece because the demographic bit is interesting to me. 77% of my participants identified as female, 20 as male, 3 as trans, nobody as other. And if you're looking into doing research about anxiety, whether or not more women have anxiety, more women are seeking treatment for it generally than men. And this other piece that was interesting to me, of the participants actually receiving medical treatment for their anxiety, only 23, so 77% weren't. And when you look at this next one, just about 3/4 of this group was experiencing it between 1 to 3 years, over half over 3 years. Something's been in your life for 3 years, it's there. And if it's something you don't like, you might be struggling, and yet not that many people are, I'm sorry, I'm so weird with this thing. Not that many people have actually been looking for medical treatment. Can we go to that? Thank you, because I couldn't work that either. So just a couple of bets, and these were, I can, sorry, and I should, yeah. I do need to look at something. So in the quantitative results, one of the pieces that was interesting to me, I thought specifically, was that 77% of the people who took this said they want more help with anxiety. They want more help. CBD treatment, something that's working for them. And for me, the looking into treatment options, this is about quality of life. This is not finding one drug that works for a couple people and we're giving it to everybody. This is about improving quality of life. And 64% agreed and strongly agreed that CBD may be used as a treatment for anxiety. But now we get into where people were answering questions, short answer questions. So the 2 main themes that were preventing people from trying CBD, first of all, was side effects. And as you're reading through what people have listed as side effects, a lot of people just put side effects, some people got specific. There was a lack of understanding between CBD and THC. A lot of people were saying side effects, well, I don't want to go to school or work high. You know, I can't hold my job, I can't travel, I can't do this. Triggering schizophrenia, that was something else we talked about psychotic episodes. And then basically, yeah, the lack of motivation. Again, these are all side effects more generally attributed to THC. And within the stigma, that was the second biggest thing that is keeping anybody from trying it. And the people who listed anything specific about very specific stigma, family, workplace, and also dealing with healthcare professionals. There's a fear that you are not going to be believed, that you're just trying to get some marijuana, and at the very worst being treated as though a drug-seeking behavior. So and again, this was a pretty basic undergraduate study. We need to go into so much more of this. People are interested in other options. There's such a huge lack of education or understanding, and where that really became apparent was I did have one question there that said, well, if you think that CBD is a possible treatment option, where have you got this information? Well, over 50% of people said family, friends, personal experience. 8% had actually spoken to a healthcare professional. And I think there is one other piece in here too. I think we have some intersecting stigmas because, of course, all the stuff we've been discussing about CBD, recreational cannabis, and confusion between that, there's still stigma with mental health. And some people have a reluctance to seek treatment as well. I think it would be really interesting if I ever have the opportunity to get a little further into this, to do some full interviews with people or maybe some focus groups so that we could really look at that. But basically, just to cut it down to the chase there, we need more education. We need to get this out there to people who are looking for information. Lots of these kids that took this survey, they're finding stuff online. They're going to the government cannabis store. It's a great place to get recreational cannabis, and they may be able to talk to you about some things, but it's a retail store. It is not healthcare. There's no healthcare professionals there. And now I'm going to pass you on to Nan and Florian, whoever's grabbing that.
So the last study we did is titled Medical Cannabis as a Treatment Option, the Lived Experiences of Parents Using Medical Cannabis for Children Living with Neurological Disorders. Can everybody hear me? So the positionality that I take, I already mentioned that I'm a parent first, and lots of these studies are motivated by our own interests, and this study came out of my lived experience as a mom of a child who went into crisis and needed another option, and he had been on 3 pharmaceutical drugs, including an anti-seizure drug. Now he's off all of those, and he's using CBD, tiny bit of THC, but I am on my 5th product because one of the producers was not licensed when legislation came in, etc. But this study was motivated by myself to find out what other families needed. And so the positionality is what I need to disclose. I wasn't interviewed, but we did 12 interviews of families that have a loved one who's a pediatric case who lives with a neurological disability. So it could be autism, it could be seizure disorder, it could be anxiety. So under the large umbrella of neurological disorder. That was the criteria. And so the lived experience is where we come from as social scientists. Florian and I are both doctorates in social sciences. So it's not like Dr. Mitchell would do, which is what a lot of physicians do or scientists do, which is inquiry-based and more scientific method. And what last year's symposium wanted in the physician crowd was double-blind, randomized, controlled tests and things like that, because that's where the evidence has come from in the medical field. The social scientist looks for the lived experience and your experience and your experience and your experience and brings them together in common themes. And this is the evidence that the public needs to know exists. It's the social science approach, and people like the nurses, psychologists, social workers, educators, etc., are social scientists. So our method of evidence collecting is interviews, surveys, focus groups, things that hear the lived experience, the narratives, the anecdotes, the stories, the testimonials. So it takes time. Each interview was about 90 minutes to 2 hours, and we did 12 of them. It was for the caregivers, really, because they represented their loved one. We had 10 mothers, 2 fathers, and the demographic was also assessed in terms of married, separated, financial, social economic status, geography, etc. And the structured interviews, the questions were similar, so there was congruency between each interview. I can do the next slide. There we go, I have it. There you go. So I need to just look at the text here because I don't have my glasses on and I can't see from over there. So I'll do the first 2, Florian, and then you can take over. So also in social science, the way you find out the themes is when you get to a place of saturation in the interviews. That's the technical term. You saturate your themes, and the saturation came after 6 interviews, 7? Yeah, and so we were like, okay, we're already reaching saturation of themes, but we wanted to do more interviews. So the trail to obtain the prescription is all over the map. GPs generally, especially with pediatrics, we're absolutely not going to prescribe medical cannabis. You know all this, Dr. Mitchell. And they would refer out reluctantly, wondering if they should even be involved in the process, because it puts them in a position of vulnerability as physicians without training and being in a place of fear, a lot of fear in the system. The access to the product alone, we had mothers and fathers going to the store, purchasing to give to their child, and they would try it first and see what it felt like, and then give it to their child, which is all wrong, so not intentional. And they get it online, they get it over the border, they would call dispensaries, ask a ton of questions, it's here. The dosing issue, this is in Dr. McCullum's article. Huge issue. I wish she was here because I wanted to talk to her more about it. The lack of physician education, the lack of nursing education, the lack of public education. The parents would hit the sweet spot through trial and error, starting with this dial metaphor of the light, Michael, and there's something called a reset where you actually take an individual off all medications, including CBD, to reset. Biphasic nature of CBD, some parents were finding out they actually were dosing way too low. During the titration of my son getting off anti-seizures, he had a seizure. I emailed Dr. Mitchell and said, he's got a seizure, we're titrating out of the lamotrigine. And Dr. Mitchell said, what dose are you on? And I told him, and he said, double it or triple it or something. We were way too low. So this whole dosing thing is a complete non-science. It's a wonder in a trial, and it's chaotic. Parents are going to multiple products to find one that's right. It's expensive, exhausting, it takes a lot of energy. Health Canada doesn't have any information, limited supervision and follow-up because the physicians are so uneducated about it, and the stigma continues to be in the community. This was a theme that came out of our interviews, that even if it was a hugely positive benefit for a child, for example mine, others, they wouldn't be telling their teachers, in-laws, friends down the street, because wow, your child's so much more calm and he seems so talkative and all these great outcomes, but they didn't want to say it was medical cannabis because then the neighborhood thinks you're the pot person and my God, you're a parent. I'm going to call social services on you. So that continuum of ripple effect. Secondly, every child is different, and yet with the intervention of CBD, most of these were CBD with a high ratio. Some had THC. They would tell us the product exactly and the ratios. Unprompted, the storytelling came. And this is the part where I don't need to look at the slide anymore. Unprompted, the storytelling came. So Florianne, my co-investigator, she's phenomenal at transcribing. So we'd have the speakerphone on, and Florianne would be transcribing right from oral text to written, which is phenomenal, by the way, because I don't have that skill. And she'd be typing away, and we'd ask the question, and mums, dads would say spontaneous things like, well, now we can go to the supermarket because my child is so calm and isn't so dysregulated that they're freaking out, because typically this family wasn't able to take the individual to the store because I've been there many times. The delamination happens and the child is so dysregulated, it's embarrassing. I've had my child in holds, like takedowns in public. It's not fun. But this person, it's okay. We've all been there, I guess. These stories would be, my son and daughter, or whomever, can go out in public now, and they're not hurting the sibling, and they're going to sleep when I need them to go to sleep, because I haven't had any sleep for years. And the ones that was blowing us away was, they told me they loved me, and I needed to hear that. And Florianne would stop typing, and I would stop writing, because I was also writing. We'd look at each other and say, I love you, but unprompted. And it was a theme that came out from the storytelling, and we're like, from medical cannabis, we have to tell these people what we found. So incredible outcomes that are positive. This afternoon there were a number of professionals here. Dr. Mitchell's talk was about all the research done in the States is based on the harmful effects of medical cannabis or cannabis. Harm, 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 shame, 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 bad, 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 therefore no research funding. We are here to celebrate these benefits and these outcomes that have changed young people's lives and their families' lives 180%. My child was a very violent child and got kicked out of school, asked to leave the school system here in Kamloops. And that's when I went into crisis and said, okay, obviously the 3 pharmaceutical drugs aren't working. And he hit adolescence on those drugs, so it was around age 12. And I just said, what else are we gonna do here? And the GP prescribed gabapentin. Isn't that funny? I wanted to tell you that. It fixes violence in schools for 12-year-olds with autism. So let's just throw another one out there. Anyway, we've seen case after case of positive outcomes. This is at the pediatric end, but generally speaking, we're going to publish, we're going to tell people that CBD or medical cannabis does things for children with neurological disabilities. It may not affect you personally in this room, but it might affect your friend down the street who does have a child who lives with anxiety or has a child who lives with an intellectual disability or seizure disorder or autism, because it seems to be in that area of brain development that this is positive. I'm going to let Florianne finish and then we'll take questions. Does that work? Carry on, my dear.
One of the most profound parts about doing this is the families themselves are so passionately trying to increase or have some kind of quality of care for their child. It was all based on not getting their child stoned so that they could deal with their kid. Like, that's one thing they kept telling us. They were very guarded in saying, I'm not trying to get them so that, you know, they're just sleeping all the time. I really want them to have a high quality of life. I want them to be able to be out there in society as best as they can. And they were at a crisis point, unfortunately, when they got across the cannabis line. And the way they got to that cannabis line was incredibly diverse and crazy making. I was trying to draw maps as they were talking in my head of, okay, first they start here, then they talk to somebody, then through some blog site they found about this GP that might do it, then they go to that GP and that GP sends them there. Some of them were just like, I'm using my own, prescription to get it for my kid. Like, it just went all over the map. They were in the dark zone of cannabis buying, they were in the legal side of things, they were crossing the border, getting it mailed to them, trying everything. It was just crazy making. And this, to me, is a huge message to Health Canada. What the heck? Why are parents having to go through all of these hurdles and barriers? I can't even imagine regular adults doing it, let alone these parents trying to get their kids through it, right? Which is, I think, even a deeper level of stigma there. Just that piece was wild for me, to just that ride that these parents were so dedicated to be on. But yes, 12 out of 14 have had profound changes, and those changes are dramatic. And yes, children are always growing, and their brain's always changing, and they have to make adjustments with this journey that they're on. And they're recognizing that too. So in a way, they're even more complicated cases because they're growing still. So they're not adults that have stopped growing, and their brain is, yes, maybe aging. There's that element too. But it's just really interesting that they have all these added challenges, and they're still at it. One thing, though, that I did that really hit home as a nurse was that these folks became the experts. They're the doctors in a way. They were the nurses doing it all and telling the GPs what they wanted and telling the specialists what they wanted because they did all the research. And others were just really hoping that the system would be ready. They don't have the energy anymore. They're like, come on, get with it. So there's a real push from these folks going, come on, get with the program, people. Doctors and nurses, right? So that piece was huge. The other part about the stigma, really sad to hear that a lot of these parents are still walking on eggshells and hiding it. And tensions between family members, which, family's so important. When you have a child with a disability, you're already struggling and you want those supports around you, but you got to hide the secret that you found CBD, right? And that piece was there too. So the stigma is still big. And yet the legalization of the medical aspect has been over, 17 years now? But for children, the stigma is even higher than for adults. So, yeah. Yes, you may. And I think I'm good.
So in the pathway that Florian's talking about, the common theme also was that each parent came to crisis to seek this as an option, which we're professing that it's actually should be an educated option of all these options. So why does it have to get to this crisis? And there were crises and stories like getting kicked out of school, my son and 2 teachers going on stress leave because he was violent. That's not so fun. Other crises were not so fun. So why can't we just go to our physicians and say, I hear that CBD has worked for this kind of thing, and my children has shown these symptoms. Could I have this option? So we'd like to see that come as an educated possible option that physicians are comfortable prescribing. That's the perfect world. They don't have to find a CannSolve, and that would come at the end of 13 phone calls, or not at all. It's an option for doctors to have in their toolkits, in their medicine kits, to say this has worked for these many children in this kind of way. So we're hopeful that it gets out of the crisis-oriented kind of reaching for alternate solutions. And the 2 cases that out of the 14 where it was not a positive outcome, the 2 families had 0 idea of dosing. The one case, they didn't notice anything in their child. I believe, in my uneducated but mother perspective, that they were on way too low of a dose. And the other family couldn't find the right product. They were going to different dispensaries without any supervision, this other part about doctor supervision, and felt completely at a loss and didn't feel that they could do justice for their kid because they're so unsupported and unguided. So I think the deliverable out of our research study is there's so much potential in this opportunity, there's intervention here for our children and adults and people living with neurological disorders. It doesn't have to be pediatric. That 14 or 12 families are saying my child's a different person, and thank God that I found an opportunity to get this intervention and get support, and most of it was on blogs, family blogs, social media of mothers saying, I don't have time to read any scientific articles that aren't even out there because they're not accessible really for the lay person to read. They go onto blogs and talk to other mothers, and other mothers tell them what to do. So that's how the point is getting across.
Just one last thing, guys. The other part was how dedicated they were to the path of success that they were experiencing. Many were putting themselves into second mortgages, line of credits, because of the cost. The cost is crazy. It's not covered by a lot of Medicare stuff. And if they find the right product, they don't want to change it because it's working, right? Because there's this other piece, this unknown of so many different types out there. So they find this one that works finally, and they're happy with it. They don't want to shake it up because they know their kid's growing and all that. They don't want to mess around with any more seizures or not. So they are spending a ton of money. And yet there's a discrepancy across the country on that, where some companies are giving you a 99% discount if you're under 14, and other ones are, it's just crazy. I know. Traveling is another thing. Where do families like to go when they travel on vacation in Canada? Do we like to go to Disneyland, things like that? So suddenly now they have more freedom to do that, but there's a little barrier there. So guess how they're doing it? Creatively. They're ordering stuff, and we got this from 3 families, right? But there's another one thinking about it. They're ordering stuff. It's sent to the hotel through Charlotte's Web, I believe, was the big one. So it's in the States still, so not crossing any borders, right, with their drugs. And then they send it over to the Disneyland hotel, just enough to get them through, because it's expensive. You don't want to waste it. And they use it there, so their child doesn't go through any changes, because they want to experience it and have a good time. And then, yeah, they just leave whatever's left over there and cross the border again. So families are amazing. Aren't they what parents do for their kids? And so, but they're experiencing a quality of life. Kids are sleeping better, anxiety's better, less seizures, all this stuff. It's just crazy. Yeah. Questions?
Sorry, I'm just giving the microphone. It's going right now, and just hold it nice and close up.
Just while you're talking in the realm of pediatrics, you've talked about autism, and well, you didn't really talk about it, but I know epilepsy is another big one too.
Yes.
Kids are treated with CBD. What about some other learning disabilities, like say ADHD?
A lot of them are, and we didn't, in our study, we do have a list of different types of diagnoses, and we did keep a few out, only because they might have identified the families because they were so specific. So we're really cautious about identifying a real tight things, but there's a lot of crossover of comorbid, I guess, or a lot of multiple diagnoses. Yeah. But what was fascinating is they were noticing the anxiety was going down, or the seizures were going down, and it was giving a child a chance to focus for a bit and interact and think things through, make decisions, things that they weren't able to do before because they were so distracted with the anxiety or the seizures or whatever the situation was. So there's something going on with this CBD business, and a little bit of THC perhaps, depending, where they're actually able to calm the brain for a minute so that they can actually do something. So we're seeing a much more creative, interactive child, much more than what they were used to, and that's different per kid too. Very individual, but that is what the parents are reporting. So higher quality of life, that's the bottom line of whatever that is for them. Happier children too, it seemed like. Yeah. Yeah. For the better. Yeah, they're celebrating, and little things they're celebrating, because to them that's huge.
Well, for the mothers that volunteered spontaneously, my child told me they loved me.
Yeah.
I mean, the parents in the crowd, boy, we all need that.
Yeah.
We need it at a basic, essential level. And for children that live with autism, the parents kind of think that they'll never get it.
Yeah.
And I had to teach my child to understand what that meant, and now he says it to me, but it's been years teaching him the felt feeling and the words that go with it. And he has some
Yeah.
people now. But these individuals that we interviewed, I had probably thought they would never get that.
Yeah.
And so while on CBD, why is CBD the connection?
Yeah, there's something interesting there going on.
Two mothers said it like one day after another of us interviewing. We were just like,
Interesting. Yeah.
beautiful thing. We have to tell the story. And they were, crying on the phone saying, my daughter, we went to the shopping center and I bought her something and she was calm. And then we got home and we got out of the car and she turned to me and said, Mommy, I love you. Like,
Unprompted.
you can't
Yeah.
assume those things. And for a person who lives with autism to be unprompted in that feeling, I mean, this is life-changing. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we're biased.
Well, we put that on our field notes. We put that on the side. That we got to make sure that we're not,
Yeah, so I had
changing our data.
I wasn't a
Yeah.
participant, I'm too close to it, but
Yeah.
but I understand when that
Yeah.
story comes out, what's behind that. Years of wanting,
Yeah.
breathing, not having.
So yeah.
Lived experiences, and this is the science that we're trying to create evidence with.
Yeah.
Social science, and it might not be a double-blind
No.
randomized test.
But I am trying to be the devil's advocate when we're reading this stuff out. I'm like, yeah, sure, maybe the parent just wants to see that. Or maybe right? But then the piece is the parents are saying, yeah, but the teacher's also reporting it. The neighbor down the road who hasn't seen my kid in 3 months is also saying, wow, who's this kid? Family members are noticing it. I'm not telling them that they're on CBD though. So they're getting evidence, not just from their own perspective that might be skewed or because they wish for it. It's other people are telling them this stuff, right? And reporting it and videotaping some of the kids at the school on new things that they're doing that they've never done before. And why is this happening suddenly? So it's that's the piece too that's really helping these parents go, yeah, it's not just me seeing it, it's actually happening, right? Less hospitalizations as well.
Sorry, just one thing that is so exciting to me about the research that you guys were doing is my whole issue about quality of life and improving treatment options just goes to show it's not just the person receiving the treatment who's necessarily getting improvement in the quality of their life, right? It can be your whole family unit.
It's the whole, it ripple effects through.
There were some families, Charlie, or some couples.
I would like to get involved in
Can you give me a microphone?
I think there was a question and then Charlie's on. Okay.
Hey, my name's Josh. I just had a question about sports injuries and what the effects of cannabis and CBD oil would be on those. It's probably someone in the ER department. You've probably seen a lot of.
That's a great topic, and right now, like these long distance runner guys, we're hearing like big penetration of cannabis into these fields. And obviously, like if you're doing darts or pool or something, yeah, you probably shouldn't smoke a joint before you do that. I'm not going to say it's going to improve your coordination, but for long distance runners, people who they're going through pain, they're like buying into this in a big way, and for healing as well. And they're not drinking because they know drinking they're not going to perform well the next day. So they're recreational, but they're using it for healing as well. But that would require really a positive study to look at. For me to take a bunch of people, for the sleep study, for this study, to take a bunch of people and say, well, you're going to get cannabis and you're not, and see what the results are. So say the sleep study, I got 30 people, I'm going to get 15, they get the cannabis tonight, the other people get a placebo. And I'm going to put Fitbits on them, and that's easy. I could do that study in a month. Tie it up, write it up. That study would take me 5 to 6 years in Canada because the regulations are so stringent for giving cannabis to anybody. It's more difficult to study than it was, it's more difficult to study cannabis than it is to study heroin. That was pre-legalization. Now there's a whole new level of regulation on top of that. So there's just little things that make it very, very difficult to do active research on humans. So for example, in our PTSD study, we had to have a safe to keep the cannabis in that was alarmed and only accessible by security guards and research personnel. Because God forbid 1 kilo of cannabis escaped into the Okanagan. Heaven knows what would happen. So this is the kind of, and so there's a whole separate research license you have to apply for. Health Canada is processing far less research applications than they were pre-legalization. So people are taking their research out of Canada and going to other countries because you just can't do it here. So I'd love to give you that answer, but I can't. Because basically you can have unlimited money and time to study the harms of cannabis, but really to study the benefits, it's just not happening. But you had a follow-up question there.
I also saw, I've been watching some like forums online, and there's like places like Thailand that are doing CBD studies in hospital, and they're actually having clinical studies occurring. Is that what you're talking about?
It's Brazil and Israel, Germany are kind of leading the field because you just can't do it here. You can't do it here. It's very difficult to do in America, so we're moving it offshore, which is unfortunate because there's no reason we can't do it here. We got lots of cannabis, but it's just brutal. The research aspect, so everything slowed down. So, and that's, physicians are always saying, well, where's the evidence? Well, you can't do it. So how, you put leg irons on me and say and run a marathon. Like, no, that's just, you're hobbling me right from the beginning. So it's not a fair playing surface. So, and kids have been the thing that really changed it all. Because with Charlotte's Web, and that's where the thing with seizures came from, you had these kids who had 200 seizures a day, and then they didn't. And then you don't need to study. You're just like, I want more of that. And then there were more and more kids having that, and you didn't need a study. Eventually a study got done. But right now, the study was done on cannabis oil, and you can get that here, and it's expensive. But they did a randomized controlled trial using a pharma medication approved by the FDA, a Pedialex, which is just purified CBD, and that costs 10 times as much as the cannabis oil that you get here. So that's perhaps the cost of research as well. It costs money to do it, and then you're going to be charging a lot more for that product. And if you can't charge that more for that product, you're not going to do the research in the first place because you've got no reason to do it. And that's the problem with the research here, is that we missed out on a big section, the 30s, 40s, 50s, where research was being done by governments, and they were doing like all kinds of funded research. Now it's only industry. And the research in cannabis is just so slow to get done. So we rely on the social science aspect of things to tell us what we need to study more, but also what people are finding out in real life.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I was just reading an article about that. There's a sports drink company, and they're a bunch of ex-athletes that are now all of a sudden going to do the infusion in their energy drinks instead of the caffeine. My name's Steve. I've been with you guys for a few years. I was diagnosed with secondary progressive MS 10 years ago, and I sort of have these little discussions and arguments with my neurologist, because he's one of those, the studies aren't there, I'm not there. But 5 years ago, I got rid of all the pharmaceuticals. I was baclofen and stuff, and I had to challenge him on it just because I just, my own research, because that's all you can do. Baclofen's a synthetic cannabinoid. And so I said, well, why can't I get that naturally from an oil? And of course, well, the numbers aren't there. So anyways, over the years, I did it myself. I got rid of the pharmaceuticals. I did the oils, and I found a good sweet spot for the oils. The only problem is, like you say, it's expensive. But going back to my yearly review, I did my tests. It's an hour doing motor coordination things. And he had to leave about 3 times, and he had to go back to his notes. But he did come back to me, and he just said, I don't know what to say to you. He says, you are better than you were the year before. So he sort of used the same idea. Try it and go with it. And so for 4 years, I haven't gone back to pharmaceuticals, and I won't. This actually does work. And I'm glad to see that you guys are doing the research studies, and I'd like to get involved in that. I could tell you exactly the doses I've been doing. I find a 125. You guys got a nice one too. I noticed that in your pamphlet. I deal with the Aurora right now. So, and the terps are the other thing that I'm looking at. They're very big. The big question I always had is I tried for a while doing a CBD isolate. You know, how you get the distillate. I found more success with a full spectrum. So what's the difference between the distillate? Like, is there...
I might get Robert Gora to touch on that in the sense of getting onto the product that they sell there at Green Organic Judgment.
So, in terms of extraction techniques and isolates and distillates, like the one thing I can tell you is that if you separate a cannabinoid, take it out, it's still going to be an active cannabinoid. But if you don't have, if you don't have the other full spectrum elements on board, including the terpenes and stuff, I mean, that's where we need research to understand what each of those components does. You know, like beta-caryophyllene or myrcene or all these different pieces and what they do and how they work with the body and how much you need, right? Because we just don't know those things. But yeah, I mean, I've heard anecdotally same thing with CBD hemp and whether or not it works the same as I was
haven't
mentioning.
tried the hemp area to that, but I did try the distillate, and I did notice it just wasn't there. My spasticity came back a little bit. But everybody kept telling me, oh, it's CBD, it's CBD, that's all you need. But I found the full spectrum oil seemed to be a lot better. The dosing is another thing that's a bit of a thing. Like with Aurora right now, I've got the 125 drops. I do 1 milligram in the morning, 1 drop, CBD, and then to sleep I actually smoke with a vaporizer a little bit. But I noticed with THC, not so much. I'm noticing with strains. Like if you get a high THC sativa, it tends to bring that anxiety out in me a little bit more. Whereas an indica will actually, it could be a high THC, but it'll put me right to sleep. You know what I mean? So is it actually the high THC or is it the combination of the plant itself?
Robert, do you want to talk a little bit about, I guess, what I want to find out about here is just more about how the products and the terpene profiles are being studied so that we can get that kind of information into the hands of patients who can say, here's kind of what works well for me, my recipe. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we brought up the research aspects, and I just want to clarify one thing. There is research going on in North America. There's lots. From my history, I'll tell you, when I was at one past licensed producer, we wrote not myself, but the company or science folks wrote a protocol for a study in dementia. We worked with a long-term care facility or secondary care facility. They have physician supervision, like everything that you'd think would be fine for a protocol review and approval through ethics, and we got denied. And we tried again and we got denied, and it was a vulnerable patient population, and we're like, well, no kidding. We're studying akathisia and agitation and quality of life, and we couldn't do it. So that's another component in the research license piece is also a big one. I know there are sleep studies going on. I've read the protocols for them and whatnot. So there is a lot of research. Will it lead to a specific indication that leads to market access or private and public coverage? I don't know. I mean, that we'll see. Yeah, I mean, so the advent of research on individual cannabinoids and terpenes, it's coming for sure. I think we're seeing isolation of different parts of the cannabis plant, and the only way we'll know what they do is to research those things. I think some of the barriers, though, to research and the expense, really, margins in cannabis aren't the same as big pharmaceutical products, right? So, and the pathway to, like in pharmaceuticals, you know, you have to go through phase 1, 2, and 3 clinical trials, and then you submit your dossier of information, and you may get approval with a DIN number, and then eventually drug coverage. And so the first 10 years of any pharmaceutical product is a total loss in terms of dollars, and you hope to recoup that within the first 3 to 5 years, and then the last 5 years of the patent you'll make money. And that's kind of the pharmaceutical model. But when it comes to cannabis, that pathway is not clear. So it's hard for an LP to say, we're going to invest, you know, $1 billion into research without knowing or understanding that that's going to lead to profitability to then contribute to more research and more product innovation. Yeah. So, like CIHR, for example, Canadian Institute for Health Research, does have a cannabis section, and they are working on some things. So there is positive things happening. But in terms of like the what and when, it's a difficult question to answer.
Somebody else.
I thought the email that I received was that this forum would talk a little bit about cannabis and pain, and I don't really feel that I've got much information in that regard from this forum. So I would like some information on cannabis and physical pain and what you have to share with us on that. And I certainly admire the tenacity and the power of mothers and individuals to take control of their medical conditions, and admire the research they do. But I would like to learn a little bit more about pain and what you have to share with that. And I would also like to just say that I do have some concerns, and this has been a very positive meeting, but everything has benefits and everything has some negative consequences. And one thing that I don't feel there's enough education on is with pregnant women and lactation. And I did see a little notation on, was it page 15, I think, just saying it's contraindicated for pregnancy and lactation. And I have one last question for Dr. Mitchell. So when someone comes into your ER, and if you ask them if they're taking any medications or alcohol, do you think people consider CBD as marijuana now, especially if they're taking it from hemp? Or do you think they would consider it more as a natural product and a vitamin, and not perhaps disclose that? And if so, do you think that would be an important component, especially if they're young pregnant women?
So it's kind of two things have happened. One is certainly more people are disclosing that they're using CBD, and I think that's generally a positive thing. They were always using it, now they're telling people about it because they feel that it's less stigmatized. So certainly I'm seeing a lot more reports of people using it. So people are willing to report it now when they weren't before. And I think that's overall a good thing. They can at least be honest with their physicians. I don't think most people think much about taking CBD as far as any concern. I mean, we've now got it in coffee and dog treats and everything now, sportswear and all these stuff. And realistically, there aren't problems with CBD that we know of. And it's pretty much about the safest thing you could say. If you take it in very large doses, there may be medication reactions. But as far as any other significant reactions, we really don't have any concerns.
Would you say that's true for like pregnancy and lactation?
Yeah, so I would say that we don't know what the effects of CBD are on pregnancy. Now, the issue with THC in pregnancy is very interesting because the question is, well, why are these pregnant women taking THC? Are they just doing it for fun? And generally they're not. Most pregnant mothers are very concerned about the health of their children. But there's a condition in pregnancy where a lot of women have vomiting, and may have uncontrollable vomiting, hyperemesis gravidarum. So when that happens, they're faced with the choice of doing nothing and being incredibly dehydrated. And they come to the emergency department. I often treat them and we give them medication. But the medication I give them is not necessarily approved in pregnancy. So there's Gravol, which typically doesn't work, just doesn't work for this condition. So then Danstron, and that's been kind of an approved medication for quite a while, but it's recently been linked to cleft palate. So I can say, well, here's some medication that will possibly give your baby cleft palate. And that doesn't really make mothers happy generally either. So they're weighing concerns they have about traditional medications, pharma medications, versus cannabis. And as much study has been done, there have been like decades of studies on the harms of cannabis, very little on the benefits. They have not found great harms from cannabis in pregnancy. Doesn't mean I'm recommending it in any way. But overall, the side effects are not terrible. Okay, and they seem to be possibly late cognitive stuff, although that hasn't worked out well, and smaller than normal birth, but small doses. So we see this, and it is for sure a problem, more because what's happening in America is all the bud tenders are saying, oh yeah, just take pot for your nausea kind of thing to pregnant women, and that's not the message either. So yes, it's a concern for pregnancy. It's probably a bit of an overblown concern, but pregnant women are making that decision because what they feel are problems with the current medications. And the most common medication is pyridoxine hydrochloride, and this is a medication that's been used for a long time in Canada, but we don't fully understand the research. And some of that research was hidden from the public for a long time. And one of the crusading kind of physician journalists, a guy called Nav Prasad, has looked at this medication, diclectin, and to look at the original studies, to look at the studies that he's looking for that have been hidden from the public, he was required to sign a non-disclosure agreement saying he'd looked at these studies but wouldn't tell anybody else. So he looked at this study, this medication that's given to pregnant women with studies that are hidden from the public, and after he came out he said, I wouldn't give this medication to people. But nobody else knows this information because the government of Canada won't share it with anybody else because it's a trade secret. So the decision is the medication that a physician said that he wouldn't prescribe to patients, a medication that can cause cleft lip, or cannabis. All three have risks, and people have to make that decision. But it's hard to make a decision if you can't see the studies, and that's one issue. So in no way am I saying it's great or it's safe, but here's some of the reasons why it's happening.
Okay, but if you're not taking for hyperemesis gravidum, you're just a general
I would say it's as
user.
drinking. Yeah, you shouldn't drink either. I would say in the same way.
And so do you feel there's been enough education in that regard since marijuana's been legalized?
There's a lot of education on that, and it's actually on the packages and everything. I'd still love to see that in alcohol packaging, right? We don't have packaging of warning labels for people not to drink when they're pregnant, right? It's not on our bottles. We want to say that alcohol causes cancer, because it does. It's a carcinogen. It's a much stronger carcinogen than cannabis, which hasn't been shown to cause lung cancer, even when you smoke it. And that's based on good research. So we want to put labels saying, don't drink this if you're pregnant. This product will give you cancer, but we can't, because we tried it in the Northwest Territories, and the liquor companies all came back and said, we will sue your pants off, so you can't do it. So just keep selling it, and don't tell people it's dangerous in pregnancy or will cause cancer. So we've come under a much stricter regime. Cannabis is much more strictly handled than alcohol or tobacco. Much more strictly warned about to everybody, despite lower harms.
Well, I would kind of disagree with you.
I think if you search for cannabis pregnancy harms, you're going to have no shortage finding all kinds of stuff.
I'm just sharing my lived experience. So I would say that cannabis is readily available in the community, and it's one thing whether you go to the store or you don't go to the store to get it. My only concern is I don't see a lot of education or information out there like there is for alcohol and not drinking when you're pregnant. And I do work with pregnant moms, and I have asked the question, and quite often the reply is, no, I don't take anything except marijuana, and it's natural, and it's fine for me and my baby. So I get that answer back to me a lot, and it just concerns me because I feel no one thing is really all good, and no one thing is really, well, some things may be really all bad. But there's goodness and risks and benefits to everything, and I have just concerned that as in coming to this meeting today, it has been very positive and very very pro and very uplifting stories, but I don't get the feedback that, you know, everyone should be aware that there's a good side and there can be risks to everything that you take.
I 100% agree.
Especially in this area, that concerns me. And the other thing that I was interested in is just how it compares for pain control.
Yeah, so Michael, maybe speak to that. Just we had a whole afternoon of pain stuff, and he's going to have it on his website. You can watch all those talks. We talked in depth about pain. So just I think we're coming to the end of the evening, so I can't really summarize all that at the moment. I'd 100% agree with you. No medication is without risk, and that is everything. But I have to tell you, cannabis is among the least risky medications I ever prescribed to anybody. The risks have been overblown for so long that they are not realistic. And you've heard many myths already. You've heard marijuana kills brain cells. I know you've heard that. Okay. And that comes, Ronald Reagan stood up and said, you know, smoke one joint, it's worse than being on Bikini Atoll. Okay, and that comes from research on monkeys, where they were supposed to strap masks and give monkeys cannabis smoke for half an hour a day, 5 minutes a day. But they didn't want to spend all that time. So they basically just strapped the mask on, gave the monkey just nothing but smoke for an hour, and then dissected their brain, showing that asphyxiation causes brain damage. But that informed decades of education for people in the DARE program from the National Health Service. All people were educated for decades. I remember hearing that over and over again. So we're only now trying to get past all that overemphasis on harms. And I'm not going to say there aren't, but it's time to start looking at some benefits.
Really appreciate all of the questions and comments tonight. And as Dr. Mitchell was mentioning here, we had an entire afternoon today of speakers, and we specifically invested in recording so that everybody who wanted the information, both on that positive side, but also speaking to where people have concerns. And so there's a very balanced and very comprehensive opportunity to review all of that. And as soon as we have that available, we'll make it available on our website. And you can do a little deeper dive into understanding about pain management, pain control, methods, the purpose behind all of this, and get a really good grounding and understanding about how that could work. It really took 5 hours today for us to pull that information together and be able to show that. So I encourage people who are interested in that to keep a look at the CannSolve website, and it'll give you an opportunity to gain some additional information. I want to thank everybody here for coming here tonight, making time from 7 to 9 o'clock when a lot of us probably would be like going home, going to bed. So I'm so grateful to you for coming out here and joining us in the public portion of our summit and sharing your voice and your questions. And whether you're brand new to cannabis or you have concerns about it, or if you want to share a story of your own experience and lived experiences, it's the dialogue that's most important. For years, this type of dialogue was suppressed, it was subverted, it was twisted and turned into other ways. And it's time now for us to have these discussions openly about these results, about these benefits. And I don't think it's a problem to discuss when we see something in what they call the N of one. It's your personal experience in these observations of what you've learned in our shared collective knowledge. This is how medicine was practiced many, many years ago. It was done by observation. It was done by sharing of collective experiences. And there's a little sampling of that here tonight. And I'm so grateful to all of you for sharing of your own time and your own experiences here. So thanks to all of you. As we close the evening as well, I'd just like to thank the entire panel of speakers here. I'm just so grateful to all of you for taking time and effort to be here. Like, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. In particular, I want to thank the fact that we have sponsorship with Thompson Rivers University. Always great to be paired up with the academic institution and to help grow this small but important voice regarding cannabis into the academic sphere as well. And many thanks to the courageous academics who wear this proudly and who undoubtedly are dealing with their own stigma for this still today. We honor you. We love you guys for that and your great work. Thank you to Mastermind Studios for doing such a great job helping us with everything here today to be able to disseminate this information and share it and bring it to a wider audience. We really appreciate all you guys. Great big thanks to Five Bean, the really wonderful folks there, Reeve, who provided us all of our coffee here this evening and helped us out earlier today as well. And a great big thank you to all of the CannSolve team who have been working so hard at making sure that we were able to pull this together. We're all really active doing a lot of patient care, and they took this on in addition to their regular duties of helping patients with their concerns. And at the same time, I saw Charlie ducking out, taking calls, helping patients, and just doing what he could at the same time. And the rest of the team here, just it's a late day for them too, so I just want to honor them for what they've done. Thank you, everybody. And we look forward to seeing you at the next CannSolve event. We intend to keep doing more of these. So thanks very much. At the CannSolve Clinic, we also have every Friday, we do a open discussion. It's just in the first theater here at Mastermind Studios. It's open to anyone, patient or not. We have a focus each week that is different, but we always emphasize new people with questions. So we take time to really dig in to a person's needs. So if you're interested, you can reach out to the CannSolve Clinic. We'll put you on our mailing list for our weekly seminars that we do. And you can come in person, ask your questions, get some information. You don't have to be a patient registered to do that. It's just if you're interested and want to share information and learn from others, we would welcome you to come join us. We're taking this Friday off. It's been a bit of a long week, so we're going to take this Friday off, but we'll be back at it next Friday. In your information package, for those that are interested in learning about the potential risks, benefits, harms of medical cannabis, we have included Dr. McCallum's 2018 paper with Ethan Russo regarding the clinical guidelines for the administration and dosing of medical cannabis. So you want to get into the literature, which describes very well a very comprehensive, balanced picture of how to use cannabis from the academic perspective and clinical. There's the most important information because there's hardly any research talking about the applied work. Like, how do you do this? And inside all of your packages, we've included Dr. McCallum's paper. We certainly are informed well by it, and I hope you will too. Once again, thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Hey, Michael, could we just ask one more quick question by chance? Just Peter had a quick question.
Oh, Peter had a question.
It's very quick. Just about employment in regards to
sure.
other employees using medical cannabis.
Okay.
I don't know if this is for Michael or if this is for you, Ian, but basically for employers who want to work with their employees who may have a medical prescription for cannabis that's meant to be, say, CBD-based or non-impairing, but where there's a requirement for the employee to work with machinery or to drive for their employment, is there a urine test or a drug test that is specific to THC or the impairment side to allow for non-impaired use of cannabis?
Yes, so the test can theoretically differentiate between THC and CBD, and that could be useful. Problem is it doesn't tell you when the use was. So if someone used on the weekend, they might still have a level that's significant enough to cause them problems at work. This is, say, for example, THC. Now, CBD products on their own should be totally fine, but we've heard, that's a ratio of product. It's mostly CBD and low THC. So if you take enough, potentially you could trip that. The biggest issue, and this came up last week, just announced that one company who does this testing for workplace showed that they were unable to distinguish between THC and CBD. So they had patients who had only CBD in their blood, who were then told to law enforcement officers, to marriage counselors, marriage judges, had their children taken away, lost their jobs, because a machine couldn't tell between THC and CBD. So that's happened. So we're still working on the technology even. Problem is that those blood levels don't correlate to impairment. With alcohol, we have very good correlation between a blood level and impairment, and it's not the case at all with THC. So that's the bigger issue at play, is those levels you're taking don't correlate with the function of the individual, and that's the biggest problem.
You know, the problem from an employment standpoint is increasingly employers are being held liable for what goes on should some kind of accident occur. And so we have to find ways of making decisions, but where there's no tools at our disposal, right? We're being forced by, the government, obviously, with the legalization of cannabis, and I applaud that. I think that's important. But we need those tools to use to protect ourselves on the liability side as well, and they don't seem to be any.
It's still very much an evolution, and obviously there's charter rights, so people have the right to use cannabis at home and then be unimpaired to come to work, and that should be fine. But yeah, there's certainly corporate responsibilities that, I can say, well, yeah, sure, you're a pilot, you can use THC and then go to work the next day. And I'm like, well, no, Air Canada's like, no, that's not okay. So no matter what I say and no matter what the science is, they have their laws. So we have to deal with medical stuff and then legal stuff, and that's not always a comfortable fit. So we're still working on it, and it's very early days.
I think a lot of employers are looking at it in a sort of a binary approach. As soon as there's a safety-sensitive component or perhaps an enhanced risk, it's sort of denied by default in terms of just saying, like, if I have a no-tolerance policy, then when my insurer or any of my liabilities that are placed upon me because I am an employer and I may be in this situation, they say by simply having a binary process, it's all or nothing. Like if you're using it, fine, but if you're not, you're not. And if you're not, and it's a requirement of the workplace that nobody uses this, and someone is in breach of that, it's pretty clear, right? It's just, if you use it, it's there, bam, you flag, boom, you're out. Now the problem is, of course, that serves insurance companies really well. It does, because they have a very clear yes, no, but the problem is that we don't, again, see the correlation between this particular number of nanograms of THC in your blood correlates very reliably to this particular level of, green, yellow, or red. We don't see that, and unfortunately, because the testing can also take a person who's using CBD, and you may end up with a test result that says that you're using THC, and if that is used as the reason for serious decisions, consequences being made on a person's career and their ability to even earn money for a living, we're not talking about like small little things like I can't get into the tennis club. Maybe that is a big deal. But the problem being that it's major, and then once you've lost your job due to drug use, because you failed a drug test, well, where do you get your next job when that was your last result? And then the stigma that follows this person, if they were under physician's orders, following what they were to do, and they managed it very well. But again, if they were using a different medication that was perhaps known to be impairing, and they weren't under the same set of rules or guidelines, then we're in a real difficult situation, because it's not congruent, it doesn't match. What you see isn't what you get. It's okay over here with these drugs, which have these problems, but this one over here, well, it's being used differently. And I guess that's one of the challenges that, in addition to that, it doesn't translate well into the real world. And it doesn't pass the sniff test as we would a common sense test, the types of things. But we're actually dealing with who's in charge here. Is it in the employer? No. No, it's not the employer. Because if there's an incident, who does the employer have to notify? Their insurance company, because you carry your own liability insurance. So who's actually in charge here? It's not the employer. The employer makes a phone call to the insurer. And insurers, what's their number one thing they manage to their benefit? Risk. So if you look at it through that lens, it's really quite trivial to follow it down to where it starts making less and less sense the further you get away from the insurance company. And that's okay, as long as we understand that the policy is being dictated from these types of things, and we understand the change really needs to happen so that insurers are willing to look at cannabis as less of a binary issue. If it's there, it's a problem. If it's gone, we're good. That's not reflective in the reality of how we actually use the medication, nor does it match the way we hold other medications to the same standard. So it's early days yet, and I hope to see some change over time, but it makes it incredibly difficult for employers because they're caught in the middle between the common sense world of what their employees are experiencing and the extremely tight risk management model that you see downloaded from the insurance company, who is the person you're going to need if you get a claim put against you. And that could end your business. So you got the employer in the worst possible spot, especially small employers with limited resources who are far more vulnerable than megacorps. I mean, what Pete's talking about is an issue I suspect facing an incredible number of small business owners that are doing their best to be fair and be in the middle. But who do they please if they can't please anyone, right? It's very tough. It's a good question, Pete, for sure. And with that, I think we'll just quickly wrap things up. Thank you, everyone, again for coming this evening. Safe journey home. Have a great night.